Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of On Oshkosh. I'm your host Cheryl Hentz. Pleased to be joined with my co-host, or by my co-host, Sarah McAninch. And on this edition we are going to be talking about senior care issues and things that either they themselves or their loved ones, family, friends, whoever, should be aware of as folks age. And to help us with that process and navigating that issue, we're happy to be joined by Jen Marty. She is the recruiting and training manager for Senior Stride Home Care here in Oshkosh. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So we want to talk about a lot of things in the next hour, but why don't we start with figuring out or talking about the various types of care that is or are available for seniors out there.
Sure. And there's a number of different options. I'll start with the least amount of care that might be needed, and I'll build up from there. So the first level of care or first option for seniors would be what we call independent living. This is ideal for seniors who are active, they're social, they're by and large getting through their day-to-day activities without a whole lot of assistance. The independent living communities are full apartments, so there's a full kitchen, there's probably a laundry. Everything is self-contained. The idea is that these folks are preparing their own meals by and large and living in really a maintenance-free environment, which is lovely. It's interesting that in independent living facilities, there's often kind of an a la carte menu of services that could be layered into that independent living. For example, maybe there's something that could be added on where there's housekeeping services, or maybe something in terms of the medication administration. Maybe somebody is coming daily for those medication reminders. Those things are kind of selected, if you will, off of a menu and could be layered into independent living. What's nice about an independent living facility is that there's typically other amenities. Maybe there's a pool on site. Maybe there's organized activities that anybody could take advantage of. Maybe there's transportation assistance. Maybe people are living relatively independently, but they're not driving anymore. So maybe that facility has transport assistance. Moving up from there, we can go into assisted living facilities, which often are housed maybe alongside of independent living. Maybe there's an independent living side to a facility, maybe there's an assisted living side to a facility, or maybe sometimes those folks are intermixed. And with assisted living, here you have a greater access to that kind of a la carte menu of services. Housekeeping and medication reminders I mentioned, but maybe we're also getting into personal cares where somebody does need some standby or hands-on assistance with a shower or with dressing. Maybe the medications are completely administered and controlled, by the facility, and they're they are in possession of all of the medications. They come to the apartment and deliver those. This is ideal for folks that need a little bit of support and assistance and 24-hour availability of assistance. And again, the care plans can range. Sometimes, again, with this a la carte menu, something just minimal is needed, but you can grow as the needs grow of the client or the resident. Then just a word about something called memory care. And a memory care unit, again, often housed maybe in the same facility as assisted living. A memory care unit is designed for people living with dementia, most notably Alzheimer's disease, which is the #1 type of dementia. And these are folks that need increased assistance with those daily activities of daily living, as we call them: bathing, grooming, dressing, meals. Their meals are prepared for them. They're no longer probably in apartments with kitchens and laundry facilities, but rather in rooms with a private bathroom. They are typically, as with assisted living, they can press a button and get care as needed. But the idea here is the supervision and the security. So folks with dementia might have a risk of wandering away and getting into some dangerous situations because they no longer can calculate the risks anymore. So when I say secure, I do mean really kind of a locked unit that has got 24-hour supervision. Moving up from there, there are skilled nursing facilities, and outside of a hospital setting, this is where a person is going to get the most clinical care. This is where your help is coming from certified nursing assistants or full-fledged registered nurses or LPNs. This is where the needs are very great. The needs and the care is very comprehensive and probably involves a lot of two-person mobility assistance, whether that person needs assistance with transfers or they are wheelchair bound or bed bound or Hoyered. And a Hoyer lift is where a patient or resident is not able to assist in their own transfers, so they need two people plus that apparatus to move from an easy chair to a wheelchair or to get onto a toilet or commode. Then moving on from there, don't know much about this, but there's also visiting nurses that can come into the home. These would be that skilled level that one would get in a skilled nursing facility, and the sorts of skills that a nurse would be involved with would be wound care. For example, if someone has a wound or an injury, that is a skilled item that we'd want to have a professional come into the home to help out with. And then finally, in-home supportive care. In-home supportive care is non-medical supportive care for seniors in their very own homes, really in an effort to help people stay in their homes for a longer period of time. And so in-home supportive care involves much of what I've already talked about: medication reminders, personal cares, mobility assistance, help with meals, help with light housekeeping, help with exercises, range of motion. Sometimes people are going to OT and PT and they've got homework to do and they need somebody to help them with that. We can help with errands, transportation assistance, and what I would maintain is the most important part of in-home care, and that is companionship and socialization, lifting spirits up with meaningful activities like baking banana bread together or playing cards or going for walks. This is really what we mean by the balanced method of care, body, mind, and spirit, and that socialization is so important because I'm sure you ladies would agree with me that loneliness can be as big an affliction as anything else. Mm-hmm. So in-home care helps somebody stay at home in their own environment. With a little bit of support, people can stay for years in their own homes. What's another interesting story or interesting aspect of this, as I had just gone through all of those different kind of levels of care, is a growing part of in-home care is in-home care agencies going in to help people in their homes, and their homes just happen to be skilled nursing environments, assisted livings, or independent livings. I know of a couple of folks that have in-home care that reside in skilled nursing facilities, and their caregivers are there for companionship. They're there to encourage food and drink, a partner to have a dinner or lunch with. In-home caregivers can help with assisted living, because whereas assisted living gives 24-hour care, they don't necessarily offer the extended one-on-one care. So that's an interesting kind of growing aspect of in-home care.
So, Jen, independent living, as I listened to you explain that, is that different then from someone staying in the home that they've maybe been in for 20, 30, 40 years or more? That can be independent living, but as you described it, it's different. It's independent living somewhere else.
Right.
Okay.
When I say independent living, I am speaking of an independent living community of a group of apartments that have common areas and other amenities and things like that. And of course, what's erased out of the equation is the maintenance of a home or a condominium, and that's of course all done for you when you move into a community.
Yay. So if someone is, whether they're considering it for themselves or it's a family member or a friend or whoever, as they're thinking about some other type of service for themselves or their loved one, how do they assess what of these things someone might need? I mean, it sounds like it's kind of easy to figure it out, but some of it might be a little more confusing. Is that where someone like yourself, a senior care specialist, comes in and helps them? You ask specific questions, and that helps to kind of peg you into one of these scenarios.
Sure. Well, it certainly goes without saying, if someone wanted to ask my opinion based on their situation, if in-home care services was not the answer for them, I would have a fairly good I think I would have a fairly good idea of where to direct them. Having said that, there's kind of a whole other industry that has kind of been created, Cheryl, that has to do with helping people navigate. You may have heard national ads for a company called A Place for Mom.
Yeah.
Okay. There's also another company locally here called Care Patrol. These are folks that you literally call up and say, here's what we've got in terms of the care that my mother needs or my father or my spouse needs. I can give you some information about where we are financially, and I can tell you what some of our other circumstances are, and that agency then would direct them toward independent living, assisted living, memory care, in-home care, skilled nursing. They would have that bandwidth to figure out what is the best way to do that. So as a personal story, when my father moved to town here, we used a service like that, and they were invaluable, because what happened was that intermediate agency, that Care Patrol or that Place for Mom, was able to leverage their relationships with a variety of different facilities. They know what the amenities are, they know what the financial requirements are. We cut out the middleman of our family, myself and my sisters, making multiple phone calls to multiple facilities to try to get details. That's already done for us by an agency that already has relationships with these people. Also, there was a financial element. We found out through that service which facilities required private pay of my father in order for him to become somewhat of a permanent resident. When he did need to go on Medicaid, we were assured that he would have a spot there. And that's different from facility to facility. The facility that my father went to, they required 2 years of evidence that he could be a private payor before his Medicaid application would go through. That was very valuable to us because we knew what my father had in terms of assets, and that had to fit with the facility because we didn't want to move my father a second time.
Sure. One question that just kind of came to mind as you were talking, if someone is going to be going from their own home into some other setting, whether it's independent living or assisted living, what have you, a lot of times people worry about all their stuff that's in the house still, and I think that if family members or the person themselves just aren't up for it, I believe that there are facilities out there that will come in, they'll talk to you, and then they will just take it upon themselves to box things up and either donate some things, excuse me, or you donate some stuff, then you keep some stuff. I guess the person sits there and kind of goes through it with them, or maybe not. But are you aware of things like that? Or?
Yeah, I think there's two things at work there within your question, Cheryl. Number one, this whole process of downsizing, which can happen over time. Or sometimes it has to happen quickly or in an emergency situation because someone is needing to move out of their home. And that is, I think, a growing business of entrepreneurs and people that are physically able to move and haul. And so the downsizing, I think, is one issue, and I think that you can go to websites and find people that will absolutely specialize in that, and they're very, very good quality folks. The other aspect of it is once we get downsized and we're moving from a 12-room home to a 3-room apartment in an independent living community, or 2 rooms in an assisted living, for example. My father had a small living room, a galley kitchen, a bedroom, and a bathroom. So once we're downsized, many facilities will have that as part of their service of moving that person into their room. So that is not necessarily unpacking, but maybe so. But that is part of a growing part of the service, just to make that transition, which is often very hard emotionally.
Sure.
At least the physical part of that can be helped with the facility because of their moving services.
Sure. You mentioned financial considerations a few times, and I've got some questions about that, and I know Sarah does, so let's let you take it over.
Well, I was actually going to start back with social. You're talking about how important it is to have a social life, right, as they go into these assisted facilities. There's so many assisted living facilities out there. You could run all of them. What would you say are the top 2 or 3 things that you should be looking for? Is there a type of socializing that works better with that particular age group? Is it nursing assistant to client? Is there a number or ratio there? When people are going out there to look, what are some of the top things that you say, make sure they've got this for socializing, make sure they've got this for support?
Sure.
What do they look for when they're looking at 12 or 15 different spaces?
It's a really great question, Sarah. And I'm reflecting back on when we were shopping for my father, and if I was shopping for my father today, which I'm about 5 years smarter on that situation. If I was touring a facility, I would look at the demeanor of the employees. Are they smiling? Are they happy? Are they moving? Are they working well together? Do I see a lot of them? Okay. Can I catch an interaction between a supervisor and a caregiver? What does that look like? Do people look stressed? Do people look overworked? Is there something in the air regarding attitude that would sway me either way? That would be the first thing I would look at, because those are the folks that are going to be caring for my loved one. The second thing I would ask, you mentioned ratio. What is an appropriate ratio? This does vary, but it is a question that should be asked, and sometimes people need to dig deep for what is really the correct answer or the accurate answer for that facility. It all depends on the level of care of those folks. There are 36 bed facilities in this city where those needs are very great. These are people that need mobility assistance. These are folks that have maybe some behavioral situations that are caused by their illness or by their dementia, and these are heavy hands-on care folks. As I was touring, I would be looking at what I was observing in terms of the care level that people were needing. Assisted living facilities, it is not uncommon for me to hear that a ratio of 1 to 20 people is something that is acceptable. And the family is going to have to understand what that ratio is and understand if that is indeed going to be acceptable.
Well, and as part of that, I would think, it's okay, of those 20 people, who really does what? You'd have to know that, right? because otherwise you wouldn't be able to really say, this is an acceptable number or it's not.
Exactly. I would want to get an observation of the level of care that I was seeing those 20 residents needing.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of people.
And it's
for
a lot of people.
One person.
And it's a lot of people. Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, thank you very much.
And then I'm sorry, Sarah, you had another good question about just the social aspect of it.
Yes, thank you.
We, in-home care agencies, I know have experienced where maybe a client will leave their care because it is a better choice for people to move into assisted living or skilled nursing. In-home care is largely part-time care. It is not the norm that people have 24/7 care, though it certainly does happen. But most clients, I would say, have a little freestanding shift of 4 hours in the morning to get that day started out right with a great shower, with their caregiver, a great shower, a great breakfast, medication, exercises, maybe a quick errand, and the rest of the time they are living very well independently. And then needs change, and people need 24-hour care. So they move into a facility, and we have seen in the industry where people do flourish in that environment because now they're with people 24/7. They have somebody to eat every meal with, right? They've already experienced a lot of change in their life. Maybe they are recently widowed. Maybe they have moved. Maybe they have a health concern. Maybe they are in pain, okay? And all of a sudden, a community is really what the doctor ordered. And so we've seen it, which is a very happy reality, I think, for a lot of our folks.
Well, and I think there's a lot of kids and spouses that, feel guilty, that they're taking them out of the house they've been in their whole life. And it can be a huge change. But what I'm hearing from you is it also can be a surprisingly wonderful change because now they're not in the house all day with the tube on trying to find something to do. They've got forced interaction. Maybe some of them are grumpy. They don't want to do it, but they have that option. And I just wonder if gathering, like you said, together as a community is so much stronger that we forget how badly we need it as humans, right?
It's an option for friendships. It's an option for increased safety and security. To know that I'm not ever alone is actually a very comforting feeling. It might take a transition. I'm not saying that every transition is smooth, but that is what a community offers by definition, and I would say a lot of people do find that.
Okay. Financial.
Well, as far as financial goes,
Yeah.
as we know in the United States, they basically have to spend down their money to afford Medicaid, which isn't like that way in Europe, isn't like that way in France. They have a much larger pot, and just they honor and esteem, that part of their community, so they want to take care of them. And so I guess for me, when you talk about budgets, can you give us a rough estimate of what the averages are for these different types of services?
I am so glad that I put that as part of my notes, Sarah, because I thought maybe you would ask that because it is a burning question. So starting at the least level of care, that independent living community where there's amenities and you're paying rent, maybe you're part of a meal plan, but it's largely independent, folks can expect that monthly cost to start at about $2,500 a month.
It's not bad. That's less than I thought it was.
Okay,
but we're gonna increase.
Hold on to your seat. Hold on to your seat. As we move into assisted living, where by definition there is a care plan in place to some degree. Usually those medication reminders. Usually meals are included. All meals are included. There's bathing. There's dressing. There's transport. There's physical transport down to the dining room in a wheelchair, for example. You can expect assisted living care to begin at $4,500 a month.
Wow.
Well, keep holding on. Keep holding on. As we move into
I don't have much else to hold on
Right,
to after those numbers.
Exactly. As we move into memory care, which is that secure unit that also offers other services to those that are living with dementia in terms of cognitive care therapies, and certainly increased one-on-one care and supervision. Here is where in memory care in these secure units, here is where you will likely see the lower ratio, okay? For memory care, we're looking at $6,500 per month starting on average. For the skilled nursing facility, which is going to be the highest level of care outside of hospital care, $12,000 on average per month.
Wow. All right. Well.
And then finally, in-home care, in-home supportive, by definition, non-medical supportive care, starts at about $32 an hour.
Well, after those numbers you gave, that doesn't sound too bad to me.
Depends how many hours they're there.
That's right.
If they're 12 hours
That's
a day,
right.
that gets to be. But that's we need to also pay these workers a living wage. So, though it's hard to hear that sound, it's the facility, it's the insurance for the facility, it's everything else. They need the cleaning supplies. Like, I'm sure that all gets put into that monthly bubble in order. But again, these are all for-profit places, so there has to be some kind of margin there. It's,
Well, no one has shared with me their balance sheet, Sarah, so I can't speak to the profitability.
Well, okay, so just thinking about paying for something like that. I mean, even if you have planned for retirement age and for whatever possibilities it might bring, it can be used up pretty quickly if you're spending, $12,000 a month or even $4,500 a month. I mean, that goes just like that. And so what kind of, and most of this is not covered by insurance, am I correct on that? Or is there?
So there's something called long-term care insurance, which is typically a supplemental policy that I don't know a majority of people have, but it is out there. And long-term care insurance can cover stays in facilities. It can also cover in-home care, one-on-one caregiver services, if that care involves hands-on assistance. So for example, a long-term care insurance policy isn't going to pay for a caregiver to largely be a companion. We are looking for evidence that there is hands-on care in order for that, that claim to be processed by the long-term care insurance.
Well, and I'll just kind of piggyback on that. Long-term care insurance, you have got to get that before a certain age, before you reach a certain age.
That's right.
Like, okay, I'm 69. I would no longer be able to apply for and get long-term care insurance.
That is my understanding.
Do you know by chance what that age cutoff might be?
I'm so sorry, I do not.
Okay.
I do not know.
But that would be something good for someone to look at, research it on the internet or talk to someone like yourself who does long-term care planning and assistance. And, well, not just long-term care. I got long-term care in the brain now. But someone like you who helps with senior issues and planning for not just today, but tomorrow and the next day after that. Because, and if you are under that age limit, for heaven's sake, get it now, because once you hit that age, you can't get it. I don't care how much money you've got to throw at an insurance company.
I'm in complete agreement, Cheryl, and I think the first place to go is a trusted insurance agent that can absolutely explain all of the coverage and the cost involved and the payout involved. I think that's the first stop, for sure. As people are looking for resources, especially as it has to do with finances, in my opinion, and I would speak to this based on the experiences with both of my parents at two different times, and my parents were not married, so these were two separate individual circumstances. An hour with a very high quality elder attorney is money well spent.
And we do have those who specialize in that here in Oshkosh.
For sure.
And another place that they could go, we've got a couple different websites that we've been putting up on the screen. One is senior, and I'll say this for folks listening to us on the radio or on some other social media platform where you can't see us, you just have audio. SeniorStrideHomeCare.com and CarePlanningInstitute.org. So SeniorStrideHomeCare.com and CarePlanningInstitute.org. And then there's some other ones out there, like the state has one, and AARP is another great one. They have so much information there, so they could look there too.
To add to your very good list, Cheryl, each county in our state has something called an ADRC, and ADRC stands for the Aging and Disability Resource Center. There is one here for Winnebago County. They are housed at the county offices there on Washington Avenue. They put out a catalog every year, which is almost like a yellow pages for services. There is everything in here from what we just got done talking about, which is long-term care options, to where might I have my father go to get his toenails trimmed?
Yeah, it's a wonderful
actually
resource.
A skilled service.
And it's free.
And it's free. And Outagamie County has one, Winnebago County has one, and they all have these lovely catalogs.
Wonderful. So if someone doesn't have insurance, long-term care insurance, they don't have any other kind of insurance that may or may not pay for something that they're getting, what do they do? I know that Medicaid is out there, and a lot of people do resort to having to go on it, and there's certainly no shame in that. But you can only, I think, have, correct me if I'm wrong on this, either one of you, but I think you can only have $2,000 in assets. You can't own a car, you can't own a home. It's $2,000 in assets, period. That's what you have in a banking account or a savings account or a checking account, whatever, and it's nothing else. I mean, it's $2,000, I believe, or $2,500. I'm not sure.
I think you might be in the ballpark in terms of what a person can have in a liquid asset and still have the state pay for their care, which is what a Medicaid application does.
Okay.
And Medicaid is really what they call the payor of last resort. Now, and please, I don't want to be quoted on any of this, but my understanding is that that the state would not make you sell your house, especially if your spouse was still living in it, in order for you to still go on Medicaid. That should be checked out individually by families. But here would be an example, and I'll use the example of my father, who was on the verge of having to apply for Medicaid. He had X amount of dollars in liquid assets, and we were able to share that with a facility here in town that had the three options: memory care, assisted living, and independent living. And what they wanted from us was proof that he had 2 years of assets without the house, without the sale of the house, to pay for his care in, at that time, the highest level of care that they offered, which was memory care, because that is where he was assessed and placed, okay? He was able to prove that, and what that bought him was the ability to move into that facility with the promise that when his financial circumstances changed and his assets ran out, his liquid assets ran out, that they would not move him to another facility. Okay, and so that was a promise that was very valuable to us. Okay, and we had every expectation that my father would live for 2 years. This also plays a role, right?
Sure.
So so as we were getting closer to the 2 years, my father was going to be ready to and he owned a house with another person. So in this case, the state of Wisconsin was not going to be able to force that sale. His partner was living in that home. So we're dealing just with the money he came to Oshkosh with, and that would get him through at least to the 2 years. So we were on the verge of having to make that Medicaid application, in which case there is a look back period of any kind of assets that he acquired. Maybe if he sold a property, the state would know about that and would want to know where the proceeds went for that. If it went to a gift, and that was within the 5-year look-back period, the state of Wisconsin is going to look at that and see if that was proper, or with, usually what they say is, was it part of a regular pattern of that person's giving, or was it an extraordinary gift to unload assets to make that Medicaid application go a little quicker. Mm-hmm. The state of Wisconsin is looking at all of that. And by the way, as an attorney told me, that look back period can change at any time, and it's changed frequently.
Okay.
Right now it's at 5 years. So in terms of looking for facilities, though, all is not lost, right? Because my father was able to move into that facility and still be a Medicaid payer down the line. And he would still be able to stay in his apartment with the caregivers that he knew. And it was 45 seconds away from my front door. And that, provided a lot of security for us as a family.
Sure.
The other thing I wanted to mention is something I learned with both of my parents, is that there would be money that you could set aside for your loved one that would be protected from that Medicaid look-back period of time, that could be used for that person's creature comforts as they were in long-term care. And the idea, as I understand it, as I remember from our attorney, is you could take out those few thousands of dollars, and those could be used for groceries. My father loved to go to Leon's. We could keep my dad in juice burgers and turtle sundaes, and we could go out for dinner, and we could buy his clothing for him, and these creature comforts, which of course none of those things would be provided by any facility. We could separate that money out, protect it from the Medicaid application, and use it for his creature comforts. When my father would pass, if there was a balance still in that account, it would be swept up. It would not go to the heirs. It would not be a way for the heirs to protect that money. It would be there for the creature comforts. Where does the money go? I'm a little fuzzy on this, but I thought that our attorney said it went into a possibly a state fund that would then help out indigent people. So that was a very interesting fact that I learned.
And it's not a trust. Right?
It probably functions a little bit like a trust, and it's also restricted. So there are restricted things that you would use that money to make expenditures on. But it was very interesting things. Certainly, if there was a caregiver in the family that was caring for that person, maybe they needed safer transport. So maybe part of that money would be used for a car. This would be not necessarily that fund that I'm talking about, but in terms of spending down money in order to get to the point where one could apply for Medicaid, an appropriate expenditure might be a vehicle because there's a family member that needs a safe vehicle to transport that person. Certainly final expenses like funeral expenses would be something that somebody could spend their money down towards that
and
application.
An insurance attorney could explain all this, right?
An elder care attorney, and Cheryl is right, there's many good people in town here that specialize in that. And like I say, an hour with a person like that with well-prepared questions, I would say is money well spent.
Because it's about $350 or $400 an hour.
That's right.
That's good to know. Yeah. So bring all your questions. Make sure you're prepared.
Make
right?
it tight. Make it tight.
You don't need to stretch it out any
longer. Right. No dead air. No dead air, as they say.
Yeah. Other than the things we've talked about, are there any kind of either federal or state or county types of resources that folks can rely upon to help if not all, at least some of these things?
Yes. In addition to Medicare and Medicaid, there's also a program called IRIS, which is a state-run program for folks that are in need of assistance with paying for their care, their in-home care. Oftentimes, it could be a family member that is working through IRIS and getting paid to be their loved one's caregiver, which solves probably a couple of different problems within the family.
Sure.
In terms of that person having to be a full-time caregiver and having to leave their job or only work part-time outside of that caregiving. They're getting reimbursed by the state to be the caregiver for their loved one. And that is a program called IRIS.
And I'm assuming that that's an acronym for something, but it's IRIS?
Correct. IRIS.
Okay. Is that an acronym for something? Or?
I'm sure that it is, and I don't know what it is.
Okay, well that's fine. We won't hold that against you.
Also, there are county resources. I'm not exactly certain, but there would be an assessment that would be involved, an assessment of need and an assessment of financial need as well.
And I will just say this, with the resource agents at the county level, ADRC, when I first looked at Medicare, seems like so long ago, and yet it wasn't really, and they could not point me in the direction of a certain kind of, Medicare plan, but they were instrumental in showing me how I could bring up all the different plans on my computer and compare them, one by one next to each other and so forth. But as far as other services that they provide for seniors and their caregivers or their families and loved ones, they were instrumental, and they are fantastic. I would highly recommend that anyone, no matter what stage you're at, don't be afraid to use them, because they're worth their weight in gold, and they don't charge anything. It's a free service because we're county residents.
That's a wonderful endorsement, and I cannot stress enough that, especially when it comes to decisions in the last chapters of someone's life or at the end of someone's life, it is so important to be able to not make those choices in an emergency where your options have been made quite a bit more limited. And to your point, picking up these little pieces of information actually is very empowering and can make these final transitions a lot less scary. Just a little bit of information can go a long way to making families feel very comfortable to start approaching their parents to talk about some of these things.
Sure.
These little steps can go a long way, because I can't stress enough to make these decisions when you've got the wonderful choices is really where you want to be.
Well, and just the information that you're sharing with us during this hour is, lending itself to all of that too, because I'm hoping, I'm sure you both are too, that people are gleaning a lot of information from this.
Oh, I hope so.
So, I mean, that's why we wanted to do it. So, did you have anything that leads us into the next
Not
one?
necessarily that, but we're seeing that with all these costs, prevention's a really wonderful idea. And so I'm wondering, what do you see the largest amount of either physical or is it cognitive? What do you see going, being the largest part of the population in these assisted livings? What is it? Is it a dementia, Alzheimer's? Is it physical? What could we be doing better as humans to prevent ourselves from needing this any earlier than necessary?
Oh, that's a big question, Sarah.
I'm sorry.
I don't know that I exactly have an answer, but what I can say, and this is a bit of a commercial for in-home care, okay, because once upon a time, it might have been an either-or proposition for families. You either stayed at home or you went away to a facility. And here we have an intermediary, which is being able to stay in your own home. And there have been in-home care agencies that I'm sure can attest to having clients for years on very part-time care and with just a little bit of support they are able to stay in their own home. So let's take a look at what it means to stay in your own home. Well, you're in your own neighborhood with the neighbors. Maybe you are in the house where you raised your babies. Maybe you are in the house where you very lovingly and strategically designed it with your partner for the purpose of being able to retire in it, where everything's on the first floor. Maybe you love your bed. Maybe the rhythm of a household is very, very therapeutic. So being able to stay at home is, I think, a big part of people's well-being. And I think that's a commercial. That's a commercial for in-home care. But I guess speaking from experience, I think that I would heal better in my own bed, and I would thrive in my own home for as long as I could. So I don't know if that answers your question,
No,
Sarah.
I mean,
It's a great question.
Prevention can be a lot of mental fortitude, right? You can heal a lot better when you're more positive, when you're feeling good, when you're feeling that you're in a safe place. You do heal more. So, and like you said, there are times when that's not possible, and they have to go, and that is a hard, transfer.
Always.
Sometimes. Why shouldn't it be, right?
Yeah.
But the best prevention maybe is trying to be as independent as you can, with some help if need be, where you're happiest.
I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
Seen it.
So don't wait till they're falling. Don't wait till they're leaving on the gas. Don't wait till it's so bad so now you don't feel like they're safe, and maybe you're making a rash decision as a child. So you've left the gas on twice, you left the door open.
Yes.
Now we got to put you in assisted living. Well, maybe if they would have been given a little bit of help earlier on, they would have not thought they had to go do this. I have to go take the garbage out. No, you don't. No, you don't. Stay inside.
I think that's it. Absolutely.
No, that's really great.
We've been talking about the various things that are out there for seniors and so forth. And I think we've been approaching it from a standpoint that a family member, is being receptive to these things. What happens, and we're down to about 12 or 13 minutes. So what happens in a situation where the kids recognize that mom or dad is having some issues, but they don't think they're having any problems? And we've all heard of or seen those kinds of situations, maybe within our own family units.
Sure.
And so then what?
Yeah.
Before getting an attorney involved and having to have someone declared, incompetent to make their own decisions.
Sure. Oh, I think it's a great question, and everything that you can think of happening has happened within families. What I will say, and this goes back to the benefit of in-home care, we are meeting people on their turf. There is a minimal amount of change because they can stay in their own homes. They don't have to go to a whole different facility. And it's been my experience in-home care that even the most resistant clients who say, well, you're very nice, Jen Marty, but I've been vacuuming my own floor now for 65 years, and I certainly don't need you to do it, with all due respect, and now you can leave, right?
And here's the door.
And here's the door. And bless their hearts, they're still in the game. I want to see that fire. I want to know that somebody wants to help me with housekeeping if I'm their caregiver. I love that. What happens, what has been my experience, because the social circle completely opens up now with these people that are visiting, and they're lovely, and they're coming with smiles, and they're being respectful, and they're being deferential, and they're being, they know that they are a guest in that client's home. What happens within about a week is that tough nut that threw me out because she could vacuum her own floor, thank you very much. All of a sudden she starts to talk about her ladies that are coming in, and I love my ladies, and when are you coming back, and you are so fun. Now sometimes the rapport takes a little longer, right? Maybe that first shift, maybe that caregiver isn't able to vacuum or isn't able to shower that person. But there's wonderful, wonderful stories in in-home care where there's been some very tough nuts, and maybe that's because of an attitude, or maybe that's because of physical difficulties or fear or dementia. And all of a sudden, we get to call that adult child up and say, guess what? we got mom into the shower today. Like, this is huge because there's now a relationship that's being formed here. So yes, those tough nuts are there. We also have folks that we care for in their own homes. We see that where it is a good choice for them to move to a facility, and maybe in-home care remains as still an option for them as they are transitioning. So that's kind of helps smooth out the rough edges as well. But it's more of a commercial for in-home care, but I think there's a lot to be said by meeting people on their own turf and gliding into these things slowly. And as needs change and needs increase, a caregiver like that can grow with them.
Is there a way that you suggest they talk to people, their parents? You know, it's like, instead of saying you aren't doing this right, you're not doing this, is being left on. Is there a better way to come to your parents and say, hey, we'd like to just give you a little help with cleaning? Or
I think I can think of a couple scenarios. Let's envision a couple, a husband and wife, and it's the husband that needs the most level of care. And instead of telling him that, and instead of trying to hold a mirror up to his situation and have him realize that he needs the help, maybe the pitch is that the wife needs the help. Harold, we need to talk about getting Janice some help with her duties. Now, we're helping Janice so she can do what she wants to do, which is care for her husband, which she can absolutely do. And she will do, and she'll do it very well, right? And we can come in and help support all of that, but maybe we do it in a little bit of a sidewinding way, okay? Some folks are very, very adamant in staying home, and that is very important to them. So a conversation about in-home care being making it possible for that person to be at home is a very big motivator for a lot of folks as well. But I won't sugarcoat it. This is a tough transition. It's tough on everybody. My advice to families is that if your loved one is going into a facility, that that facility be in the city that you live in, and you be a daily visitor.
Okay. In our remaining time, I want to talk about caregivers a little bit. Quite frequently, it is a child or a family friend or a loved one that's maybe not a child, but it can be so stressful on them. And, respite care even for them is highly recommended. Other than not doing it at all, which we don't want to see.
Right.
Or, if there's not respite, in the near future, what are some of the things that someone can do to minimize the effects on themselves when it comes to being a caregiver? Because if they're not taking care of themselves, they cannot take care of someone else properly. Mm-hmm. And so can we just address that for a few moments?
And when you go to the county resources, you will see resources for family caregivers, support groups, respite ideas. There is a wonderful organization here in the Valley called the Memory Project, which specifically assists caregivers, family caregivers of folks that are living with dementia, with workshops, with daycare events, with outings, with coping seminars and things like that. Those resources are definitely out there. If we haven't talked a lot about this, but this might be a quick opportunity to talk briefly about hospice. Hospice, as many of maybe your viewers know, is an agency that comes in with the medical services, etc., for folks with a terminal illness, where the focus now moves from a curative standpoint towards that illness, more to managing the symptoms of the illness and really focusing on quality of life for the end of their life. People can be on hospice for many months. They can be walking, talking, eating, drinking, playing cards, and being very happy. And the hospice services come in with nursing visits, with pastoral care services, with counseling services, with pet therapy, with music therapy, with social workers, with visits. They are not on site 24/7. That would be maybe more the role of a family member or in-home supportive care. But when you sign up for hospice, you're getting all sorts of other support when that decision has been made to no longer, have the chemotherapy or no longer do dialysis. Or, boy, I'm 99 years old. I don't want to go to another doctor's appointment. I would like to be home. And so maybe hospice is the answer. Hospice, as a bright spot, is free. All of your tax dollars that go into your Medicare, that is money that goes towards hospice. So when you go on hospice, that typically, by and large, is free service. You've already paid for it.
What is the difference between hospice care and palliative care?
Palliative care, you can still be on treatments that are curative in nature, but you get all sorts of those other hospice types of services, visiting nurses, counselors, social workers, therapists. You can be on OT, PT, and still have palliative care. It's sometimes an in-between, between a diagnosis of a terminal illness and hospice, or maybe it's the palliative care support that can get us on the road to recovery.
Mm-hmm. So two very different things, and yet they're both sort of end of life
They
stages.
certainly could be. They
Okay.
certainly could be.
Okay, we are down to about 3 minutes.
Okay.
So any last thoughts that you want to leave viewers and listeners with?
When I think of professional caregivers that do well in these in-home one-on-one care situations, happily in the state of Wisconsin, in-home care is non-medical. So, anybody can do this work. They don't need special certifications. Speaking for myself, I hire for heart and train for skill. I've had factory workers that have come in and done beautiful work with very vulnerable people. So these people are all around us, and this is very satisfying work, especially as we fulfill the mission for people to stay in their own homes, which is just increasingly, as we've talked about, so very important. Mm-hmm. So non-medical caregivers are all around us, and that's a bright spot. That's a bright spot for those of us, that are trying to hire these folks or are looking for people to help our loved ones. They are all around us.
Sure. I want to just repeat some of these website addresses. First of all, IRIS is a state agency, IRIS, state agency that can possibly help with some kind of financial assistance with some of these things. Your local aging, disability, and resource center for your county, and if you're watching us from some other state, I'm sure that your county there, wherever you may be, has something similar to it, if not called the same thing. Websites to check out. We could go with careplanninginstitute.org, careplanninginstitute.org, and no spaces in between those words. Senior Stride, STRIDE, seniorstridehomecare.com. Also, you mentioned Care Patrol here in Oshkosh, so check that out. And, oh gosh, I know the state of Wisconsin has a website also. Just go to dhs.wisconsin.gov, or just type in State of Wisconsin Home Care, and you'll get to it that way. And then last but not least, aplaceformom.com. I'm waiting for someone to start aplaceForDad.com.
I know.
But they do everything. A Place for Mom does everything.
That's right.
So those would be it. So Jen Marty, Recruiting and Training Manager for Senior Stride Home Care, which is one of the websites we've provided you with. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much.
You've done an outstanding job in giving wonderful information. So I hope that people, act upon this and help themselves and their loved one before those needs are thrust upon you and you don't have a whole lot of choices. Thanks to Sarah as my co-host, thanks to the rest of my crew, and of course, as always, thanks to you. We do this for you, so we appreciate you being there. We will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.